Socialism is often talked about, but how much do we really know about its impact in the real world? For many, the word socialism may spark images of poverty or government control, but the truth is much more complex. Did you know that some of the world's happiest countries, like Denmark and Sweden, have embraced socialist-inspired policies? Or that Cuba, a small island nation, has a healthcare system that rivals that of many developed countries? But it's not all success stories. Venezuela, once the richest country in Latin America, is now struggling with severe poverty and inflation, a result of failed socialist policies. And China, with its explosive economic growth, mixes socialism with market capitalism in ways that seem to defy the usual rules. In this video, we'll explore real-world examples of socialism in action. From Cuba's revolutionary healthcare to China's rise as an economic powerhouse, we'll break down the strategies that shaped these countries' paths. Stay tuned to find out how socialism works on the ground, and what happens when it doesn't go according to plan. The answers might surprise you. Chapter 1, From Theory to Reality, the evolution of socialism. Socialism, in its most basic form, is about redistributing wealth and power to create a more equal society. But it's far from just an idea on paper. In fact, socialism has evolved over centuries, often in surprising ways. Karl Marx, the most famous advocate of socialism, believed that the working class would rise up and take control of the economy. This idea was revolutionary in the 19th century, and it sparked countless movements worldwide. Yet, real-world applications of socialism often didn't match Marx's vision. In practice, socialism varies based on local conditions and leadership. For example, in the Soviet Union, socialism took the form of a centralized, state-run economy. Under Joseph Stalin, the state controlled every industry, but at great cost to individual freedoms. Contrast that with Scandinavian countries, where socialism is a blend of high taxes, universal welfare, and free market capitalism. Here, the state doesn't own everything, but it plays a massive role in providing social services like healthcare and education. In the 20th century, many countries experimented with socialism, from Cuba to China to Chile. Some embraced socialism as a way to challenge colonial powers, while others viewed it as the road to development. However, most socialist experiments involved trade-offs. For instance, while Cuba's education and healthcare systems are often praised, it also faced economic stagnation. This paradox is a key feature of socialism's real-world history. It brings both successes and setbacks. Chapter 2, Cuba's experiment. A socialist nation in the Caribbean. Cuba is one of the few places in the world where socialism has survived for over 60 years. After Fidel Castro's revolution in 1959, the country embarked on a socialist experiment that would change its social and political landscape forever. Unlike most countries that eventually moved toward market reforms, Cuba remained loyal to its socialist ideals, even through tough times. Cuba's healthcare system is often cited as one of its greatest successes. With a doctor-to-patient ratio higher than in many developed countries, Cuba boasts some of the best health outcomes in Latin America. In fact, its life expectancy is higher than that of many wealthier nations. But this success is not without trade-offs. While healthcare is free, Cuba's economy is heavily constrained. Shortages of goods are common, and the country faces constant pressure from the United States due to the long-standing embargo. One interesting fact about Cuba is its literacy rate, which stands at 99%. The country's commitment to education is impressive, with universal free schooling from elementary through university. This emphasis on education has played a significant role in lifting Cuba's population out of poverty. Despite these positive outcomes, Cuba's economy has struggled. Since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, which had been Cuba's main economic ally, the country has faced severe shortages of everything from food to basic goods. The government tried to fix this by introducing some market reforms, but the central planning model still dominates. Cuba remains one of the most centralized economies in the world, and while some improvements have been made, it's clear that socialism in Cuba has its limits. Chapter 3, Nordic Nirvana or Socialist Illusion. Unpacking the Scandinavian model. When people think of socialism, many immediately think of the Nordic countries, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. These nations are often cited as examples of socialism in action. But are they truly socialist? Technically, no. These countries have strong free market economies, but they also embrace key socialist principles such as high taxes, generous welfare systems, and universal services like healthcare and education. In Denmark, for example, the government provides free healthcare, education, and even subsidizes childcare. But the cost is high. Danes pay some of the highest taxes in the world, with income tax rates that can reach up to 55%. However, these taxes fund a broad social safety net that allows citizens to enjoy a high standard of living. The result is a society with low poverty rates, high social mobility, and one of the highest levels of income equality in the world. Sweden's model is similar. While it has a thriving market economy, it also boasts some of the most comprehensive social programs in the world. The Swedish government spends nearly 30% of GDP on social services, including free education, pensions, and unemployment benefits. Sweden's approach to welfare has led to significant reductions in poverty and an overall high quality of life. Norway takes a slightly different approach by using its oil wealth to fund its social programs. The country's sovereign wealth fund, which is one of the largest in the world, has allowed Norway to build a strong safety net without over-relying on high taxes. In fact, the country's unemployment rate is low, and its citizens enjoy some of the highest levels of wealth and well-being in Europe. However, despite these successes, some critics argue that the Nordic model isn't a pure socialist experiment. They point to the robust free market capitalism that exists alongside the social safety net. For instance, Norway's oil industry is privatized, and Denmark's labor market is one of the most flexible in Europe. These elements of capitalism are crucial to the success of the Nordic countries, proving that even in a society with socialist characteristics, market forces still play a significant role. In short, the Nordic countries offer a blend of socialism and capitalism, proving that a mix of the two can lead to positive outcomes. But while they are often held up as socialist success stories, their high standards of living are the result of unique strategies that blend government intervention with market-driven solutions. Don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for more insights on socialism's real-world applications and how they're shaping the global stage. Chapter 4: The Red Dragon, China's Socialist Market Economy. China's rise to global economic dominance is often described as the result of a socialist market economy, a unique blend of socialism and capitalism that has baffled many observers. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping introduced economic reforms that shifted China away from strict socialist policies. Instead of sticking to the traditional centralized planning, China began embracing market reforms while maintaining political control through the Communist Party. Under Deng's leadership, China's economy transformed from a closed, agrarian society to one of the world's largest and most dynamic economies. The strategy was simple: allow for market-driven growth while maintaining state ownership of key industries like energy and telecommunications. Today, China boasts the world's second-largest economy, driven largely by manufacturing and export. A striking example of China's socialist market economy is its emphasis on state-owned enterprises, SOEs. These enterprises play a major role in key sectors, but they operate in a market environment, which means they must compete and innovate. This hybrid model has led to rapid industrial growth. For instance, China's massive infrastructure projects, including high-speed rail systems, have been built through state control but also by leveraging private investment. Yet, despite these successes, China's model is not without its challenges. The government's tight grip on the economy sometimes stifles innovation, and inequality is on the rise. A recent report showed that China's wealth gap is widening, with the richest 1% holding more than a third of the country's wealth. This issue has become a source of concern for the government as it balances economic growth with social stability. But China's most fascinating strategy might be its approach to innovation. The government has strategically invested in high-tech industries like AI and green energy. China is now the world leader in electric vehicle production, with companies like BYD and NIO competing globally. The state's investment in these sectors is a clear example of socialism meeting the demands of a modern, capitalist world. Despite all this, China remains firmly under the control of the Communist Party. While markets are open, political freedoms are limited, and the government remains determined to keep its grip on power. The country's unique version of socialism has given it incredible economic growth, but it has also raised important questions about the balance between government control and market freedom. Chapter 5: Venezuela's Crisis, Socialism in Freefall. Venezuela was once held up as a beacon of socialism in Latin America, but today it serves as a cautionary tale of how socialism can unravel under certain conditions. The country embraced socialism under Hugo Chavez, who took power in 1999. Chavez's policies, including nationalizing key industries and redistributing wealth, initially led to impressive reductions in poverty. But those gains were short-lived. The government's decision to nationalize Venezuela's vast oil industry seemed like a bold step toward greater economic control. In the short term, this worked. Oil revenues flooded into the government, and social programs aimed at the poor expanded rapidly. By 2013, the poverty rate had fallen from 40% to just 25%. Yet, this was not sustainable. The real trouble began when global oil prices fell, and Venezuela's economy, overly reliant on oil exports, went into freefall. As oil prices dropped, so did the country's income, and the government's socialist programs crumbled under the pressure. By 2017, the poverty rate had skyrocketed again, reaching nearly 87%. Food shortages, hyperinflation, and a collapsing currency made life unbearable for millions of Venezuelans. One of the most interesting aspects of Venezuela's crisis is the role of central planning. In a socialist system, the state plays a central role in the economy, but Venezuela's government attempted to control too much. From food prices to production quotas, the government's overreach created inefficiencies that led to widespread shortages. Businesses were unable to function properly, and the country's infrastructure fell apart. In addition, Venezuela's socialist policies were often implemented without a clear strategy for long-term growth. While the government spent heavily on social programs, it failed to diversify the economy beyond oil. This left Venezuela vulnerable to external shocks like the decline in oil prices, and the country was ill-prepared for the crisis that followed. Today, Venezuela is still struggling with the aftermath. More than 5 million people have fled the country, making it one of the largest refugee crises in the world. The government has tried to adjust, but its economic reforms have been slow and ineffective. In hindsight, Venezuela's socialist experiment highlights the importance of a balanced economy, one that doesn't rely on a single resource or overly centralized control. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with more content on the real-world effects of socialism. Chapter 6: Revolutionary Roots, Socialism's Impact in Latin America. Today, socialism in Latin America is far from a thing of the past. In fact, it continues to shape the political landscape in many countries. From the election of progressive leaders to grassroots movements calling for more government intervention, socialism remains an influential force in the region. The most well-known example of this is in Bolivia, where Evo Morales, a former coca farmer, served as president from 2006 to 2019. Morales' government implemented socialist policies, including nationalizing natural gas and oil industries, which had been previously controlled by foreign corporations. This led to a dramatic increase in government revenue, which was then used to fund social programs aimed at reducing poverty and improving education. Similarly, in Argentina, the government has embraced socialist policies under the leadership of President Alberto Fernández. Argentina's strategy involves heavy government spending on social welfare programs, including subsidies for transportation and food. While these programs have helped many Argentinians, the country also faces high inflation and a growing public debt. In Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega's Sandinista government has pursued a similar path, focusing on wealth redistribution and social programs aimed at the poor. However, the country's political repression and economic challenges have raised concerns about the sustainability of these policies. Despite their challenges, these governments have been successful in certain areas. Bolivia, for example, has seen significant reductions in poverty, with the country's poverty rate dropping from 60% to 30% under Morales' rule. Similarly, education and healthcare have improved in many countries that have embraced socialist policies. However, these successes are often overshadowed by the region's long history of economic instability, corruption, and political unrest. What makes Latin America's socialist movements unique is their revolutionary roots. Many leaders in the region were inspired by figures like Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez, who advocated for socialism as a way to free Latin America from colonial powers and imperialist influence. This sense of resistance remains strong today, as many in the region view socialism as the best path toward justice and equality. Despite the challenges faced by socialist governments in Latin America, the desire for social change remains powerful. From Brazil to Venezuela to Argentina, many people are still fighting for a more equitable society. Whether or not they succeed will depend on their ability to balance socialist ideals with the realities of the modern global economy.